This week we begin the book of Vayikra, which is known as Torah's Kohanim. The laws which pertain to the Kohanim, they are the only ones who are qualified to do the avodah, the service in the Mishkan, the Beis Hamikdash. And later it discusses the laws which pertain to them, which Kohen is qualified, which Kohen is not qualified, if he's in a contaminated state, or various situations. The Ramban explains in regard to the Mishkan, we find that the book of Shmos, Sefer Shmos, is referred to as Sefer HaGula, the book of redemption. We speak about the bondage in Egypt, the Gula, the Exodus, destruction of the Egyptians, receiving of Torah at Sinai, we become the chosen people, and all of a sudden we speak about the building of the Mishkan, which seems to be, its location should be in Vayikra, because the Mishkan was the location of the Avodah. But yet, the Mishkan and a number of portions discuss the Mishkan are in the book of Shmos, which is Gula. What relevance does have to Gula? So Ramban explains what is Gula, what is redemption. Redemption is to be reinstated to the level of the Avos HaKadoshim, the holy patriarchs. Chazal tells the patriarchs themselves, Hein Hein Merkava. They were the location of the divine presence in this world. The level of the divine presence of the Holy of Holies, which was in the Holy of Holies, that was exactly the relationship between Hashem and the patriarchs. They were his location. Klal Yisrael, if we wouldn't have done the Chet Egel, we would have been that location. Being fully reinstated to where the Avos were, we've achieved Geula. We've gone from Geula, Yaakov, we went to bondage, we have to return back to that location. But on a national level, we failed. The Mishkan, Hashem says, Vosli Migdosh Ushachati, make for me the sanctuary, and that would be the medium for me to dwell in your midst. So until that was fully developed and everything was in place, we were not back where we started from. Therefore, the essential part of the Gula is the reinstatement that the Shekhinah, the divine presence, should dwell in our midst. That's the reason why the Mishkan is in the book of Shmos and not in the book of Vayikra, because that's the completion of Geula. Now that we have that relationship, now we speak about service. The service of Hashem, what type of species qualifies as the sacrifice, who is the officiant, so on and so forth. That is, and when is he qualified, when is he not qualified? This is the book of Torah's Kohanim, the book which the laws which pertain to Kohanim and all their involvement in the Mishkan or in the Beis Hamikdash, which is the permanent location. The Ramban cites a Mor Nevuchim, Guide for the Perplexed, that the reason why it's called Guide for the Perplexed, because the Rambam, he had written a work for those who didn't have much background in Torah, Judaism, so he had to offer reasons why God gave the mitzvos to us. Like you have the Chinuch, offers philosophical rationales why we do mitzvahs. Also, he offers similar context to appreciate the value why we do mitzvahs, why something's permitted, why it's not permitted, till we should realize the value. So he writes regarding korbanos, sacrifices, what is the concept of sacrifices? That a human being has a natural need to serve a higher power. So therefore, he gave us the context and the opportunity to bring a korban, to build a mizbeach, and to bring a korban, to express our subservience to higher power, who is Hashem. If we wouldn't have that, since the human being has that need, it would express itself in paganism. So the Jew should not be a pagan. He gave us korbanos to serve Hashem. Ki Yaakov korban Hashem. You bring a sacrifice to God. The Ramban says unacceptable. That's definitely not the understanding. But the word korban comes from the word either to become closer to God, or lekarevis hakochos. It's to coalesce the various energies, spiritual energies in the world, to bring it together as God wants it. Everything should coalesce. That's the concept of korban. There's nothing to do with. It's an avenue to express ourselves that we should not veer towards paganism. So Rameir Simcha Dvinsk explains that the Ramban misunderstood the Rambam. There were many stops after we came to Canaan, before we came to Yerushalayim. Now, we had something before we came to Shiloh. We were in certain locations. We were in Gilgal. We were in Nova Givon. Nova Givon, although they brought sacrifices, they only brought communal sacrifices on a communal altar. It was called Bama. Bama means an elevated location, and the Mishkan was called Bama Gedola, which you brought communal sacrifices. During this period of time, although the Torah says that if you bring a sacrifice, you must bring it in the Mishkan, but that's only if the Aron is in its location. So since during this period of time, the Aron was not in its location, it was in captivity, therefore, one is permitted to build an altar on his rooftop, in his backyard, out in the field, and bring a korban. And what kind of korban do you bring? It's a burnt offering. Normally you bring a korban. It's a peace offering. It's a guilt offering. It's a sin offering. A thanks offering. On a bama, you can only bring, one's only can bring an ola, a burnt offering. In the bama gedola, one can only bring a communal offering, or offering which is an obligation, like a sin or whatever it may be. So, the bama, now, the Torah says, whenever we speak about kapara, atonement, it has to be lifnei Hashem. It has to be in the presence of God. The presence of God is only in the Mishkan. So of course, when you bring a korban, the Mishkan, Beis HaMikdash, which is lifnei Hashem before God, because that's the location of the divine presence, then korban coalesces all the energies, the forces, exactly as the Ramban says. The Rambam, when he says, when we don't have that opportunity to bring the korban, to bring that about, and you're permitted to bring the korban on your rooftop or in your backyard or out in the field, that's only because of what he writes in the Moreh Nevuchim, God fear perplexed. That since a person has a need to express a subservience to a high power, that the Jew should not veer after idolatry. But the Rambam is not speaking in the Mishkan or the Beis HaMikdash. That's the Rameir Simcha of Dvinsk. That's the way he explains it. There's a question which is asked. The Gemara says at the end of Nochos that today that we have no Beis HaMikdash. And one is obligated to bring a chatos, sin offering, a guilt offering, burnt up, whatever it is. So Gemara cites a pasuk. It says, "Unishalma porim svosenu." We will pay the oxen with our lips. You don't have to actually bring oxen. If you say the verses of the Torah which relate to the karbanos, so Gemara says, "Kol ome parshas chatos ki likra chatos." If one says the portion of chatos, it's like you brought the chatos. If you say the portion of the olah, it's like you sacrificed the olah. Okay? Osham, like you brought the osham. So Chafetz Chaim says, when the Gemara says that, that's only if you understand all the intricacies of that service. Just to say the words and you don't understand the format and the order and the protocol, it doesn't have the value. But if you do understand it, then it's valued as if you actually brought the korban. So there's a question which they ask. The Gemara tells us that there was an argument between the Chachomim and Rabbi Shmuel. On Shabbos, you're permitted to read by candlelight. So the Chacham say you're not permitted to read by candlelight. Why aren't you permitted to read by candlelight? Because Shema Yatem. Because as the wick is burning in the oil, what happens if it starts dimming? If a person is engrossed in reading, he forgets it's Shabbos, and as reflexively he'll start manipulating the wick, that the wick should absorb more oil, which is a Torah violation. That's known as kindling, causing that to happen. So therefore, Chum say, therefore you're not permitted to read by candlelight. It's a fence on Shabbos. You're not permitted to read by candlelight unless you have somebody who watches over you while you read. So if you attempt to do that, that person will remind you or stop you from doing it. Rabbi Shmuel says no. Ani ekrov lo ater. I will read, I'm not concerned. What happens? Rabbi Shmuel reads, and sure enough, he manipulates the whip. So he violated Shabbos. So Rabbi Shmuel recorded in his personal diary, Kishi Yibona Beis Hamikdash, when the Beis Hamikdash will be built, Avi Chata Shmeina, I will bring a fat sin offering. So the commentators ask, but if we say, the Gemara tells us, that if we have no Beis Hamikdash, and you were able to say the psukim, the verses of the various sacrifices, and you understand the intricacies, which Rabbi Shmuel definitely understood, so why do you have to record in his personal diary, when the Beis Hamikdash will be built, I'll bring a fat sin offering, let him say the portion of the sin offering, and it's like he brought the sin offering. Evidently, see, saying it is not sufficient. That's the question they ask. So what the answer is, the words of the Gemara are, it says ki'ilu hikru chatos. It has a semblance of a chatos. It's not exactly. If you say the psukim, it has a semblance of the sin offering, but it's not the sin offering. So the question is either yes or no. Right? Does it bring the sin offering? Is it the sin offering? Is not. So it's not the sin offering. What do you mean? It's as if. Why should it be as if? Now, the Mishnah tells us in Pirkei Avos that if 10 people study Torah, Shechin Yamayim, the divine presence is with them. 5 people study Torah, Shechin Yamayim, the divine presence with them. 3 people study Torah also. 2 people, yes. Even 1 person, the divine presence is with them. Okay? So now, if we're saying, what's the differentiating factor between bringing a korban to Beis Hamikdash or bringing a korban out in the field when you're permitted to bring the sacrifice? What's the difference? One is Lifnei Hashem. One is in the presence of the divine presence. The other is not in the presence of the divine presence. That's the difference. Therefore, as the Rambam says, so why does the Torah allow you to bring that korban out in the field when you can't bring it in the Beis Hamikdash or the Mishkan, in the Mishkan? Because a person has this need to be subservient to a higher power. But there's no relevance to Shekhinah. The divine presence is not there. But what about if you say the portion of the Chatos, and you understand what you're saying, and you understand the intricacies of the Korban? So it's no less than, that's Korban Torah. You're studying Torah. So that reading has relevance to divine presence. So because it's not the divine presence that brings atonement in the Beis Hamikdash or in the Mishkan, that's Hevichatos. But this is Ki'ilu Hevichatos. It has a semblance of Hevichatos because there is some level of association with some degree of divine presence. Therefore, it has that value, but it's not. Therefore, Rabbi Shmuel had to record in his personal diary, Kishe Yibor Beis Hamikdash, when Beis Hamikdash will be built, Ovi Chata Shmeino, I will bring that fat sin offering. Now, we find that Balak, who was the king of Midian, he was concerned that Klal Yisrael are coming, they would destroy his nation. So he commissioned Bilam to curse the Jews. So Bilam comes, and Bilam was a sorcerer. Besides, he was a prophet, but he was a sorcerer. And he goes and he tells Balak, we have to build altars. 7 altars bring so many sacrifices, so I should be able to curse the Jewish people, to allow God to allow me to curse them. He builds and brings the sacrifices, falls on deaf ears. So he goes and he supplicates Hashem. He says, it doesn't make any sense. Here I bring all these sacrifices. He says, the patriarchs, each one brought one sacrifice. And their sacrifice you value. My sacrifice, I bring all these sacrifices. How don't you value them? He was like confounded by this. He couldn't understand it. Now, Bilam's sacrifice, what was its value? It was Bama. He brought the animal as a sacrifice to God. It was a sacrifice, but it has no relevance to the Shekhinah, to the divine presence. When the sacrifice in location of divine presence, then it's special. Okay? Even a non-Jew could bring a korban in the Beis Hamikdash, but who officiates? The Kohen officiates. He could only bring a burnt offering in the Beis Hamikdash. Not a peace offering, not any other type of offering, but a burnt offering can. But where is that offering being brought on his behalf? In the location of the Shekhinah. When Bilam built these altars, and as many, he could have sacrificed 1,000 sacrifices, it was not in the presence of Hashem. It had value when the Avos, when they brought their korbanos, even one, where was it? If Heinein Merkava, if they themselves are the equivalent of the Holy of Holies, it's even more. Where is that korban being brought? Literally in the presence of Hashem. So if that's the case, it's a different dimension. Bilam's sacrifice have no relevance to the Avos, to the patriarch's korbanos. Therefore, he didn't understand this. He's a prophet. Moshe is a prophet. You know, I'm this, and he's pompous. He believes his own narrative. It's okay. You believe what you want, but we're not talking quantitative to any degree. We're talking over here qualitative at a level. It's not to be fathomed what the value of that is. That's Heinein Merkava. Therefore, their korbanos had that special value. It's the equivalent of bringing the sacrifice in the Beis Hamikdash or in the Mishkan. The portion begins Vayikra el Moshe. God called to Moshe. V'yidaber Hashem elu me'ol me'ed lemor. And Hashem spoke to him from the communion tent, saying, the Torah could have said, V'yomer Hashem el Moshe. V'yidaber Hashem el Moshe me'ol moed. What's Vayikra? He first called him, and then he spoke to him. What is the context, or what does it connote, calling before speaking? Vayidaber is more formal. Vayomer is less formal. But what do we mean Vayikra? Let's say a person walks into a room and just starts speaking to you without saying, excuse me, I'd like to speak to you. If you say first, I'd like to speak to you, and you call to the person, I'd like to speak to, firstly, you want him to be attentive, and you're showing value, that you value the person, that you're informing him that you're about to speak to him. But if you just start speaking to him without informing in advance, you're not valuing the person as a person. So what does it say, Vayikra el Moshe? It was only first he called him, and then he spoke to him. L'chol dibros, l'chol amiros, l'chol tzivuyim. Whenever it says Vayidaber, or it says Vayomer, or it says God commanded, Kod Makriya. First it says Vayikra, Vayidaber. Vayikra, Vayomer. Vayikra, Vayitzaber. Loshin Chibo. It's the expression of love. Of love. Loshin Shemalachi Ashoris Mishtam Shabo. It's an expression that the angels themselves use this word. Shenemar says V'kora zel ze v'yomer. Right? They call to one another. That means each one values the other echelon of status of angels. Al vi umas olam nigla aleim b'loshin harai v'tuma. But when Hashem reveals Himself to the prophets of nations of the world, it's like in passing. Shenema v'yikor Elokim el bilam v'yikor. From the word mikra, happenstance. I happen to meet you. It's not pre-designated. Vayikra el Moshe. Now, why are you calling to Moshe? Because you want him to be fully attentive to what you have to say to him. It's like a person who's about to embark on something very special. You want him to appreciate what that is. He should prepare himself to be fully attentive and prepared to embark on whatever that project may be, or that engagement may be. Vayikra Moshe, he says, Hakol holech magil oznov. The voice or the sound travels and it reaches his ears. V'chol yishad lo shomim. No one hears but Moshe. Yochel aflaf sokos, hoyse kriyo. Pamelo v'yedaber l'divo hoyse kriyo v'lo laf sokos. He called to Moshe to be attentive to what he was going to say. What about for the pauses? That Hashem called him for the pauses. Umayu avsokos, mashamshos. He spoke, and then there was a pause. He didn't say to Moshe, now we're going to pause. He spoke, there was a pause, and then he called him again for the next, what he was going to say again to him. Maybe as he called for him for what he had to communicate, he also called him, now we're going to pause. So there wasn't. It's all Vayikra Vayidaber. Umahoyu Havsokos Mishamshos. What was the value of the pauses? Lite Revach LeMoshe, Lite Lizbonein Be Parsha LeParsha, Ubein Inyan Linyan. The pause, the value was that after he was taught a certain degree of information, he should be able to reflect on it to comprehend what was taught to him. Okay? So here you're learning from God himself, and you need the pause to reflect and to comprehend what you just taught. So a mortal to a mortal who doesn't have that capacity to transfer the information, there's no question you have to pause to be able to appreciate and fully comprehend what was said to you, what was taught to you. Now, the Medrash tells us that Moshe, the Pasuk says, Moshe was in heaven 40 days and 40 nights. Now, what was he doing there for 40 days and 40 nights? So the Medrash says every day Hashem taught Moshe the Torah in its entirety. Every single day. At the end of the day, Moshe would forget it. And it repeated itself 40 times. On the last day, the 40th time, Moshe was able to retain the Torah. He retained it. Okay? Do you know what it means? To communicate the Torah's entirety. That's the written and the oral law. This is almost unlimited information. How do you communicate so much information within 24 hours? If you say he forgot it, but how do you communicate initially? He understood he forgot it. Well, how do you do it? Answer, it's a miracle. It's a miracle. So if it's a miracle, what do I need the pauses for? If it's the miracle for you to even to get it into you, to communicate it, you can only reflect on what you heard. That means you have to retain it to some degree. So that means, how does he even retain it to that degree? The answer is, it's a miracle. So if that's the case, what does he have to reflect? That should also be part of the miracle. You're only reflecting to appreciate the information. So Hashem should communicate it to him in a way that'll appreciate it. That's part of the miracle. No. You have to take out time yourself to reflect, and that's the pause, to reflect, to understand and appreciate what was given to you, despite the miracle. Why? What do we understand it? Now, we'd ask the question, it says, by the menorah, it says, Te oses a menorah. The menorah shall be made. It doesn't say you shall make the menorah. So why doesn't Torah say, Te oseh, it shall be made? So Rashi cites the Midrash that Moshe nishkash ma'aseh menorah. Moshe had difficulty making the menorah. So we'd explained it. We're not talking about the physical form. Because the physical form, he had a form of fire. At Sinai, he understood exactly what it was supposed to look like. But we said that each one of the vessels had a certain significance and value and purpose. It had to be infused with a certain intent, kavod, in terms of what it was supposed to affect. Now, what is the menorah? What does it represent? What is its value? It's illumination. It's elucidation. It represents Torah Sheba'al Peh, the Gemara says. It's the oral law. It's to elucidate the written law. Now, the Gemara tells us, now, what is the extent of the oral law? So this, based on the Pasuk in Eov, the oral law, God's wisdom is infinite. So if you have to infuse it with an intent to activate a wisdom, which is infinite, how could a finite being infuse that level of intent? It's not possible. Therefore, God said to Moshe, you know what you do? You take a block of gold, throw it into the kiln, and the menorah came out. God made the menorah. That means it shall be made. It was made. Moshe did not make the menorah, but it will be made. He says, just put the block of gold in, came out a menorah. So we ask the question, if the menorah was a miracle, what does he have to say to Moshe? Put it in. Put the block of gold in. You have to do nothing. A menorah is going to come out of the fire. It was a miraculous need, the case. But we see, minimally, Moshe had to take the initiative to put the block of gold in the fire. Why? Because the Gemara tells us in Megillah, when it comes to come upon the truth of Torah, you have to take initiative. What degree of initiative you have to take? As much initiative has to be taken. Yogata motzos atamin. If a person toils in Torah, you will come upon its truth. If you don't toil in Torah, do not come upon its truth. So therefore the Gemara says, if a person says, I've toiled, I did not come upon its truth, don't believe that person. Why? You may believe you toiled sufficiently, but if you did not come upon its truth, that means you didn't toil sufficiently. And if a person says, I did not toil, I came upon its truth, you may believe it's the truth, but it's not the truth. Because this truth is only God-given, only if you toil. That's the prerequisite to come upon its truth. Okay? Therefore, why did Moshe put the block of gold into the fire? That's his initiative. That's your initiative. That's the initiative to activate all the forces that will elucidate and give you an understanding what Torah is. That's the reason why Moshe had to put it in. That's the Yogata Motzosa. The Gemara tells over a story. At one time, everything was committed to memory. So Gemara tells us that Abaye had forgotten Mesechus Shkolim, the tractate of Shkolim. So he had taught it to one of his students. So he says to his student, I forgot it for whatever reason. Could you reteach it to me? We're talking about the text and whatever. So the student says to Abaye, there's no problem, I'll come to you. I'll come to you and teach it to you. He says, no, I'll come to you. The Rebbe says, I will go to the student, to the Talmud. So Abaye says, no, I'll come. Why? Because it's Mistay Milsa. I will succeed if I come to you. So Rashi in his commentary says, you know why he said, I will come to you? That's Yogata Motzasa. That whatever initiative you take, that initiative will activate and bring about that divine assistance to come upon the truth of Torah. That's why Abaye went to the student rather than the student. Whatever initiative you can take, that's the initiative you should take. That's the Yogata. Putting the block of gold into the kiln, that's Yogata. Now, teaching Torah is miraculous. 40 days, every day, Hashem communicated the whole Torah's entirety. The written, the oral law, which is unlimited. How do you get it all into a 24-hour period? It's a miracle. Miracle. But you have to pause and reflect. What does he have to pause and reflect? If he's able to retain the information in that short period of time, so let him understand without the pause. That's your input. That's the Yogato. That's Moshe's initiative, that the reflection is the initiative of Moshe to be able to understand, because without initiative, you don't come upon the truth of Torah. That's the reason why you had to have the pause. But for the pause, there's no Kriya. I'd have to call you, I don't have to tell you to pause. Hashem will stop teaching, that means it's time to pause. When he's ready to communicate again, Vayikra, he calls again. That's a Loshe Chiba. But the idea is, that's the Yogata Motzosa. That's your initiative. It's very interesting. A person has a phenomenal mind. Instantaneous understanding. And you're sitting, and you're studying, and your Rebbe teaches you phenomenal ability to elucidate and explain and communicate. And you're a smart person, you have a phenomenal mind, razor sharp, and you just sit there and you take it all in. And then afterwards, the moment you finish, you're off to something else. And you don't reflect on what he just taught you. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. It's truthful as the Torah was, that the Rebbe, that the teacher communicated to the student, and he understood everything as it's being communicated. But to be able to process that information, to come upon its truth, you need reflection. Moshe Rabbeinu needed reflection. The Rashi cites it was a Kal V'chomer. If God to man, to Moshe, he needed reflection. So man, mortal to mortal, definitely needs reflection. You have to take initiative. Here the whole thing is miraculous. And even in that context, you need man's initiative. So where everything is purely on a natural level, there's no question you need initiative. That's the Kal V'chomer. Always mention the name of Chaim Volozhiner. The words of the Gemara is Yogato Motzoso. When you toil, you will find. If I say to you, if you're working long enough, you will understand. So the Gemara should have says Yogato, if you've toiled, Hevanto. You will understand. What does it say? The word mutz, you will find. If a person goes and digs and he comes upon a treasure, did you create that treasure by uncovering it? The treasure was always there. You came upon the treasure because you took the initiative by uncovering layers of dirt, and you came upon the treasure. Identically, you have to go through that process of toil to find it. Then you merit the endowment. Then God gives it to you. It's a find. It's not an understanding. Because to understand that you need a special siyata d'shmaya, special divine assistance to be able to process that information. Otherwise, you don't understand it. It says, he spoke to Moshe Me'ol Moed from the communion tent. So Rashi cites the Midrash. I'll read it in the Midrash itself. Maybe when he spoke to him in a whisper. And that's why nobody was able to hear outside of the communion tent, because God was communicating to Moshe in a whisper. The intensity, the force of the sound was no different than at Matan Torah, where the Jews, when they heard the first of the 10 commandments, they expired. They didn't have the capacity to receive the intensity of such sound. Shenemar. And he said to Moshe, Im Yosim anachnu l'shmo es kol Hashem Elokeinu od v'mosnu. They asked, you be the intermediary. We can't listen anymore, because if we continue, we're going to die. V'cheinu omer nafshi yotze b'dabro posuk in Shir Hashirim. They expired their souls when he spoke to them. How do we know that Hashem, when he spoke to Moshe, it was with the audibility of Matan Torah? The voice of Hashem is always with power. Hear the kol, the sound. What's hakol? The same voice that he heard in Matan Torah, the intensity of that voice was no less in the Ol Moed. Shenemar, and what is the intensity of that voice? Kol Hashem Shovei Arozim. The sound of God smashes the cedars. Every communication, whether it's formal, informal, or it was a directive. Maybe it's a community tent. If the sound is so loud, you understand, it's not insulated walls. Did they hear it outside? One second. If it was so intense and so loud, why weren't they able to hear outside the communion tent? It was only to Moshe, and no one else was able to hear. It's similar to we know sound waves travel. What happens? See, they travel, they can only travel so far, then they just totally fade out. Of course, a person who hears better, like a dog has exceptional hearing, he can hear things a person can't hear from very far away, because he has more keen hearing. So there are sound waves, but they're so subtle you don't hear them. But it has such intensity. Why can't you hear it beyond the certain? Because God says it's to this point doesn't go any further. The sound waves don't go further. You know, we read in Hazino, it says when an archer shoots an arrow, once the arrow is shot, it can't be retrieved. It's released, it can't be received. When Hashem shoots an arrow, sends a punishment, he could retrieve it even in flight. Today we understand, you know, you have these laser-guided missiles, these Tomahawk missiles. They could direct them halfway, they just go down. They could stop them in midair, they could stop them. You know, we have all these things, the Chofetz Chaim says, for us to visualize, to be able to understand. You know, if we're able to direct something which is traveling at such speed and all of a sudden to stop, so Hashem can't retrieve whatever the force he released. So the sound wave, it's intense. It only goes till that point, doesn't go beyond that point. Now, but the question is, if Hashem is only speaking to Moshe Rabbeinu, he's not speaking to anybody. He speaks to Klal Yisrael You speak with such magnitude. But here you speak to Moshe in a small communion tent. Why can't he speak to him at an audible level, a whisper level, with the same sound at Sinai? The Kol Hashem Shove Arozim. It says Kol Shoy B'Daber Shoy Kol Shema Torah. Why? What's the reason for this? The Ramban writes, Shmos, that we find that the Mishkan is a replication of Sinai. Every aspect of the Mishkan is Sinai being replicated. That's what it is. If Klal Yisrael wouldn't have sinned with the eagle, the gold calf, where would have the Shekhinah dwelt? In our midst. We didn't need this edifice called Mishkan, the outer vertical beams. We didn't need it. It would have dwelt directly in us, but because we became tainted as a result of the idolatry, we were no longer qualified, we were no longer the receptacle for the Shekhinah to dwell in our midst. Therefore, we needed a medium called Mishkan, mostly Migdosh v'Shechan v'Socham. Through the medium of Mishkan, I will dwell in your midst. That's the medium. So it comes out, what is that medium? The medium is the equivalent of you. It has to be exactly Sinai. It's a replication of Sinai. Within the context of Sinai, at what level or ability did Hashem speak? Kol Hashem Shovei Arozim. So within the Mishkan is the equivalent of Sinai, same level or ability. That's the reason why. Because this is a reinstatement. The Mishkan is the reinstatement of Sinai. If they would have sinned with Chet Egel, Sinai would have been, that would have ended with Sinai. There wouldn't have been anything beyond Sinai. Now, but the Mishkan, everything, the communication has to be the same communication. Therefore, it's Hashem b'koach. For that reason, the cold, the sound is with that level of intensity. The Torah says, Vayedaber Hashem. The Torah says, Vayikra Moshe, he called to Moshe, Vayedaber Hashem. There's a word which seems to be a little superfluous, slightly superfluous. Elov. Me'olmo Ed Lemar. God spoke to him from the communion tent saying, could have said, Vayedaber Hashem Me'olmo Ed Lemar. What's the Elov to him? So Rashi cites the Midrash. Elov is what? Is an exclusion. To him and to no one else. Who are we excluding? You say, maybe he spoke to Aaron also. Maybe Hashem not only communicated to Moshe, he also communicated to Aaron. Aaron was a special Jew, right? Aaron, we find the shokel in a certain context, it was the equivalent of Moshe. Rashi says, Lamait Aaron. It comes to exclude Aaron. When Hashem spoke to Moshe, it was only Moshe and not Aaron. Rav Yehuda ben Beser Omer, Yud Gimel Dibros Nemru B'Torah, LaMoshe, L'Aaron. We find the word Vayedaber mentioned 13 times in the Torah when it speaks to Vayedaber Hashem al Moshe ve'al Aaron. So maybe when it says El Aaron, it means he spoke to both of them. He spoke to Moshe to communicate it to Aaron. How do we know this? Because 13 times it says Elov. It says Elov o Ito. Right after it says with him to exclude Aaron. 1 second. Yud Gimel Dibros Nemru B'Torah LaMoshe u'Aaron u'Chenegdon, and within those contexts, Nemru Yud Gimel Miyutet, the 13 exclusions, limitations. L'lamdoch, to teach us, Shelo la'aron Nemru elo l'Moshe. Sheyomar la'aron. It was said to Moshe to communicate, to transfer it to Aaron. Ve'elohen Yud Gimel Miyutet. What are the 13 exclusions? L'daber ito. Medaber elov. Ve'daber elov. V'noaret iloch. Kulam Torah's Kohanim. Okay? Now, we've discussed this in the past. What is the numerical value of Echod? 13. That's Echod is 13. The 13 times it says Vayedaber, and corresponding to that, we have 13 limitations on the Vayedaber. To tell me only Moshe, not Aaron. You think Aaron? Also? No, it's only Moshe. Why is it 13? Why not 5? Why not 15? 13? Now, why was Moshe the only one qualified to be the recipient of that communication? Who is Moshe? If Hashem is Echod, who are we? Right? We're also somebody. If you're also somebody, it's a problem. That is an infringement on the Echod. Moshe Rabbeinu, there was no infringement on the Echod. Moshe says, I am, what are we? We are nothing. But every aspect of Moshe's being was negated to God. Therefore, regarding Moshe, Hashem was truly echad. There was no what about me. There was no I, about anything. Basically, now on Hashem attested the fact there's nobody more dedicated, more faithful to me than Moshe Rabbeinu. We find by regarding leaving Egypt, there was a prerequisite to leave Egypt. They had to take the remains of Yosef. So the Gemara quotes a pasuk from Mishlei, from Proverbs, Chacham leiv yikach mitzvos. The one who has wisdom of the heart takes the mitzvos. Now, what were all the Jews doing when Moshe was looking for the remains of Yosef? They were borrowing the gold and silver vessels. That's what they were busy with. Why? It's a mitzvah. What was Moshe busy with? He was looking for the remains of Yosef because that was a prerequisite to leave Egypt. Because he adjured the Jews, they can't leave Egypt unless they take his remains with them. Now, why did Moshe choose that and everybody else chose the other mitzvah, so to say? So the Gemara says, because Shlomo Melech says in Mishlei Proverbs, Chacham leiv yikach mitzvos. The one with the wise heart, he takes what he has to take. Now, if you have millions of Jews leaving Egypt, what would you say? Do you mean somebody of millions is not going to address the issue who's going to take Atzmos Yosef? So you always pass it on. It's going to be taken care of. So where does everybody gravitate to? Where they want to gravitate to? Gold. To the gold, the silver, to the value. Do you understand? Each Jew, minimally, there's a question, was it 10 pack animals laden with gold and silver? 10, 20, 50? I mean, it's not enough. Maybe you take a break and go look for the remains of Yosef. Moshe Rabbeinu was only occupied because he knew if you have wisdom, wisdom says you don't take any chances. If that is the prerequisite to leaving Egypt, we have to find that. But why? Why did Moshe Rabbeinu gravitate towards that? Because you know what Moshe Rabbeinu is? There is no Moshe. There's only God. Moshe is echad. And because he's echad, therefore, there wasn't even consideration to even have an inkling to go look for anything else but that. Because the will of God is what? Is to leave Egypt. They don't leave Egypt at that moment. We go into the oblivion. We're holding by the Memte Shari Tuma, the 49th level of impurity. We had to leave then. They couldn't be delayed. And if we don't leave, what happens? There's no Sinai. There's no Kabbalah Satorah. God's glory, that God created this existence, was only through Torah, through Klal. So it's never going to happen. How could that be? There's not even a consideration, because that was Moshe was echad. Why did Moshe? He was the recipient. He was the conduit for Torah. What's Torah? Right? Torah's Hashem Tvima. It's perfect. It's truth. Chosam Mishal HaKadosh was emes. Truthful. Why was Moshe the only qualified person to receive the Torah? Because there was no separation. He was the conduit. It went because, as it says, Shechina medaber mitoch grono. When he spoke, the divine presence spoke from his throat. It's not Moshe speaking. Moshe was permeable. The Shechina went right through him. Somebody else can't go through it. You know, it's like you have a lead cask. You know, it contains everything. You can't go through that wall. Can't penetrate the wall. Moshe Rabbeinu, he radiated. Why did he radiate? The neshama radiated again because what was Moshe? There was no Moshe. Every aspect of his being was dedicated totally to God. We've mentioned, you know, God doesn't have a double standard. Chas v'shalom. No such thing as double standard. And it says by the Mishkan, the Nisim are written choser. The word Nisim is written in a deleted state. Context. The Yud is why? Because they were the last ones to contribute to the building of the Mishkan. And they brought the Avnei Shoam, the Shoam stones and the breastplate stones. Why did they wait till the end? Because they said, let the Jews bring what has to be brought, and what's lacking we'll bring. So the Medrash says, Lefishnis atzlu, because they were lazy, they weren't sufficiently motivated, therefore they were nearly left out. because of the laid backness. Therefore, they're reprimanded. And how do we know they're reprimanded? The letter Yud is deleted from the name. Their action, even though precious-wise, material it was precious stones, but value-wise, God valued it the least of everything that was given. Now, we read in last week's Parsha, Moshe Rabbeinu, he erected the Mishkan. And the Jews themselves, they tried to erect it, they couldn't erect it. Why did Hashem want Moshe to erect the Mishkan? Because Moshe did not participate in the building of the Mishkan. So Hashem said, although he didn't participate in the building of the Mishkan, let him erect the Mishkan. Now, but why did he participate in the building of the Mishkan? Because Moshe Rabbeinu says, let the Jews do what they have to do, and if they're missing anything, I'll complete what they miss, what they lack. Hashem says, Moshe, your words are phenomenal. You're precious. You're special. I mean, here, the princess said the exact same words verbatim, and he clobbers them. He reprimands them. Your diamonds are worthless, nearly worthless to me. Moshe Rabbeinu, he's extolling him. Moshe, you're one of a kind. There's nobody who's more precious than Moshe Rabbeinu. So how do we differentiate? The answer is, if a person recognizes opportunity, there's no way to hold yourself back. So didn't see him. Weren't you there? You should have been there immediately. The answer is, the only reason why you didn't fully appreciate the specialness and the value is because you were lazy. That's why you were laid back, because you were laid back. Moshe Rabbeinu, the concept of atzlos, of laziness, has no relevance to Moshe. There's no Moshe. Moshe is God. There's no fiber in his being. It is a motion that's not dedicated to God. So what is the only reason why he didn't participate? He says, how do I have a right to deny any Jew the privilege and the opportunity to build the Mishkan? If I be there, I may deny some Jew the opportunity. Moshe, you're truly the dedicated servant. Because Moshe is Moshe and they are them. Two different reality. Moshe is Echad. That's what it's Yud Gimel. There are 13 times it says V'yedaber, and 13 exclusions. It's only him and no one else. Therefore it can't be Aaron. As great as Aaron was, but he wasn't Achnumah. He was not at that level that was totally negated to God. Now, the Torah attests to the fact, this is the Maral of Prague says, the Torah says, when Moshe passed away, the Torah gives a full physical evaluation of Moshe's physical being. Lo noslecho, lo koseino. Here, his vibrancy did not in any way dry up. His eyesight was perfect. Afilu bekever, even in the grave. So Maral asks, what do we gain by knowing this, right? That his physical condition, when he passed away, he was 120 years old, but he was like a young man with all the vibrancy, even in the grave. What's the Torah telling us? You understand? The whole concept of deterioration is only within the physicality. There's a cause and effect. Moshe, because every aspect of his being was spiritual, the whole concept of deterioration had no relevance to him. So he was unaffected because of his level of dedication, of negation to God. That's the reason why the Torah is attesting that it's an impossibility. It's an impossibility if you're you. But Moshe wasn't him. He was totally spiritual. Therefore, even the grave, no decay, no decomposition, because that's only in the physical. Moshe Rabbeinu is not a physical being. He's totally spiritual. Famous midrash. There's a pasuk in Mishlei. It says, "Gavas Odom tashpilenu." The arrogance of man will lower him, will take you down. Ushval ruach, but the lowly spirit yismoch kavod, that will support honor. The person who's arrogant, haughty, you think he's way up. that's going to take him down. And the one who's lowly spirited, Yisrael Kavod, that will support, will secure the honor. A person who pursues status. Sror is status that you lord over other people. Sror barachs mimenu. That lordship will flee from you. But a person who flees from a position of status, it will pursue him. Initially, when they said, Shol, you're the one who's qualified to be the king. This is what he told me. I'm nothing. And he says, we'll see. Unless God says I'm supposed to be, I don't want to be bothered. God says I have no choice. I have to accept the position. You have here, you're offered to be the king of Israel, first king of Israel, and you say, that's only if God, otherwise I don't want, just don't bother me. That means he had no interest. V'yishlu od b'Hashem, havo od elish. So they said, they asked Hashem, should we go back and ask him again? He says, he's a person who's hidden. He's nechba. He's concealed el hakelim, among the vessels. What does it mean el hakelim? He says, I'm not qualified. You must be knocking on the wrong man's door. You got the wrong address over here. This is what Shol said. Ella, he says, you know something? If I'm qualified, shal urim v'tumim. Ask the urim v'tumim. That's the breastplate. If it illuminates and says I'm supposed to be, I mean God wants me, I have no choice. Hanichu also said it beyond Vishol B'Hashem. Again, they asked the urim v'tumim, and they said Shol is the king. One who flees status will pursue them. Now, Moshe borach min Asror. Moshe fled from lordship. At the burning bush, what did he say? After being dying for 7 days, why don't you send the one who usually sent? It's very interesting. This midrash is different than what we know. It says, why was he so adamantly against taking the position? Because he was afraid he would be actually offending his older brother, Aaron. Because Aaron was older than he was. From here we see no. The reason is he was berech min asrara. He fled from honor. He fled from status. Hashem tried to seduce him, literally, for 7 days. Beshivo. And finally, after 7 days, he says, Shlach no b'yatishloch. Then he says, I'm not a person who has the ability to speak. I'm not articulate. I swear in ultimately you're going. You're going to be going. So he goes to Paro, listen to this. Send my people out to serve me. Speaking in the name of God. Omer also Rosh, the Paro says, Mi Hashem Hashem. Who's God? I should listen to God. Hislam Moshe Omer. I think Farasisi Shluchosi. So he says, he says to God, I'm finished. He asked me to go. I went. I'm going to retirement. Holach v'yosha Omer HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Yoshavta l'cho. You mean to say you're sitting down? Go back. He had to continue to tell him, coax him, go back. Why did he want to go back? Because he's in the position of lordship. He was fleeing from lordship. Hashkim baboker, so all this is to reinforce and re-emphasize. He continuously fled from Sorrow. Ultimately, he took us out of Egypt. V'korle samayam, split the sea. V'avim el amidbor. V'horid lemes hamon. Ve'elo lehemes habe'er. Ve'egis lehemes haslov. V'osas hamishkan. He made the mishkan. So we're fully reinstated. You understand? He's going to retirement. He says, I'm out of the picture. I'm out of here. I already did everything. I'm back to my books. I don't need the honor. I don't need the prestige. I have no interest. I have something, an opportunity and responsibility, which is greater than all that you've done until now. Yesh kol lami l'Yisrael tuma v'tayro. La'asiro an hech yu makrivim bonai korban lefonai. Hear this. He says, I have something which is even greater than what you've done until now. Greater. How could it be greater? He brought the Torah to Klal Yisrael. He took us out of Egypt. We became Dam HaNivchor. But even greater than that, you know what that is? To teach you the laws of Korbanos. Now, what did Hashem say to Avraham Avinu at the Bris Bein HaBesorim? There are only two things that are going to save the Jews, and allow them to have a relationship with me. Torah and Korbanos. Without Korbanos, it's not going to happen because they have to be atoned. Man himself is not perfect. We're prone to fail. Inadvertently, minimally. So they have to have Korbanos. But a korban could only be brought within a certain context. What happens if you contaminate it? You can't bring a korban. So therefore, you have to teach him exactly how to bring the korbanos, the sacrifice. Shnema v'yikrel Moshe. Dabrel b'nei Yisrael odem ki akmim korban. Moshe borach min asur vrot ha'achrov. So continuously we see Moshe is the model. He was offered status, the ultimate status, and he fled from it. L'kai ma shenemar. Gavas odem tashvilenu. The arrogance of man will take him down. Ushval ruach yisboch kavod. Zeh Moshe. And what did he achieve? He was only lacking a minuscule amount of understanding of God, and honor and splendor engulfed him, crowned him. What's the whole idea? What's the concept? The more there's of you, there's less of God. You know, the Gemara tells us that a person who's truly pompous, self-centered, God says the world is not big enough for both of us. Imagine you have a whole universe. Hashem says, you're a Balgaiva, you're pompous, arrogant, self-centered. The world is not big enough for both of us. If you ever meet a self-centered, arrogant person, you know what happens? He'll say, how are you doing? Thank God. Before you realize it, you're already talking about him. They want to ask you how you're doing. Every conversation ends up with the person who is the self-centered, pompous person. You understand? God is not this guy's doormat. God exists for this person to accommodate him. God says, you made a mistake. You're here to accommodate me. I'm not here to accommodate you. That's the reason why God says the world's not big enough for both of us. Because the way you process everything within your context, it's only you. There's nobody else but you. And even me, it's for you. It's not for me. God says the world's not big enough for both of us. That's the reason. So therefore, that's the reason why honor and status, flee from that person. Because what is honor and status? That has value. It has to have true value, innate value. But if the value is limited to this small context of the smallness of this person, it has no relevance to him. But if the person is fleeing from honor because he recognizes the objective, God says you're the man for the job. Because you recognize, you process it, you'll implement it properly. But if you have this conflict of interest with this person has, it's going nowhere. Or it's going right into to assume his profile, nobody else's profile. I'll just end with one thing. Famous word from the Kotzka. Kotzka was very sharp. Very sharp. He had a sharp tongue. And this chassid came to him and said, you know, this is called a barech min ha-koved. Koved rodif achrav. If you flee honor, and if it pursues you, he says, I've been fleeing from honor all my life. Why hasn't it been pursuing me? He says, you know what your problem is? You're always looking over your shoulder.